Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate you coming. Hope you're having a good time so far. I know I'm standing between you and lunch, so we'll not make this painful. I've learned a long time ago, the great way to get a presentation started is by giving away freebies and gifts. So I got two of them for you. There's pens and notepads in the back if you need them. We can give them to you right now. And the other one is $10 cash. So anybody that fills out a Gartner survey while they're here gets $10 cash. What the heck? That's half a drink at one of the bars here. So feel free to do that. I encourage you all to go through that. So what are we here to talk about today, this morning? We're here to talk about why MarkLogic is the best database for Agile development. And to do that, we'll talk a little bit about Agile, a little about some of the other methodologies, and then get into how MarkLogic really fits in that new world order. I really want this to be an interactive session. I'm depending on you guys to speak up throughout the session, ask questions, throw out some examples, give me your history. We have a microphone here. If you have questions or whatever, we'll get it to you. But please, engage with me. Let's have some conversations, because if not, I'll have to explain this little Band-Aid to you. It's a really gory, long story that you don't want to hear. So let's fill up the time with some good conversation. Everybody ready? Let's go. So as I said, methodologies. There's methodologies everywhere. So how many people use Waterfall methodology in their world? A lot of hands. Agile? How many Agile users do? Yeah, great. Any of these others? Critical Chain, Prism, Kanban. Anybody use any of those? Couple, okay. So it's everywhere, right? But they all have one goal. That's to deliver successful projects, right? In the end, the methodology doesn't matter. What matters is the results. I personally think that Agile is the best way to get to most of those results, but not always. So for the most part, we're going to focus on Agile and Waterfall, comparing some of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I can share a couple of the scars I have across my back when trying to do something that should have been in Agile in a Waterfall process. So, Waterfall versus Agile. Most of you are probably familiar with this, but I will reiterate. So in a Waterfall model, everything flows in a linear fashion. You get the conception, get all the buy-ins you need, get folks to agree to the project, you kick it off, you get the analysis, and then you spend a lot of time analysis and design. Data analysis, functional analysis, system analysis, SLA analysis, all analysis and design. In a Waterfall project, usually most of your time spent in that analysis and design section before anybody touches a keyboard and does any real coding. And then you move on to building, testing, deployment, assuming everything went well and nothing changed from your analysis and design phase. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Agile method, it's more iterative. You get your concept, but then you initiate it, do some analysis, and it's cyclical. You do it over and over and over again until you get it right. Small steps, baby steps, making sure you have what you need. So I found this on the internet. I thought it was appropriate. This is my view of how many Waterfall projects transpire. You have a great plan to begin with, and something happens along the way, but you're stuck with, having what you started with. Has anybody had this type of activity occur to them in a project? I see a couple heads nodding. It's painful, isn't it? Because then you have to explain to people how you got here when they thought you were going here. And guess what? Once you're here, then you're back. It costs you more in time, money, resources, everything that people care about. So Agile, along the same things. It's a repetitive thing here. There's an old saw about tell everybody 3 or 4 times what you want them to learn. It's iterations. You start with a concept, change it, try to improve upon it, continue improvement till you get what you want. And Agile in a project, in an enterprise, doesn't have to ever end. Even after you're in production, even after your system's running, you can use the same process to improve, upgrade, the whole 9 yards. There doesn't have to be a solid end date for Agile. It's really a supporting mechanism there. So let's play a game. Got 3 rounds for you. The winner gets a free development license of MarkLogic. So, you guys caught me already. So there's 12 tenets of Agile. I'm not sure how many folks are deep into Agile and have gone that far. There's 12 key tenets of Agile. So for round 1, which of the below are actually the 12 tenets? A, highest priority is to satisfy the customer through the early and continuous delivery of valuable software. How many folks think that? Yeah, most folks. That sounds good. Faster is always better, right? That's got to be a tenet, you think? Simplicity. The art of maximizing the work done is essential. Yes, no, maybe? What do folks think? I see some heads nodding. Dogs are better than cats. True? True. Maybe true. But it's not a tenet of Agile. Oh, yes, it is. No. But simplicity and satisfying the customer. Key tenet of Agile is getting your stakeholders, getting your customers, the folks that will be using the system in whatever form, be they business people, be they technical people, be they end users, customers even, engaged early, get their feedback so that you build them the right rock. You get them what they need quickly and early, and then you continue to grow that. That's the key part of Agile, is getting that feedback, helping people get to their end goal. Okay, round 2. Management of the individual contributor is essential. Anyone think that? No takers? Ooh, savvy group. Working software is a primary measure of progress. I see a couple hands there. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information is face-to-face conversation. Yeah, I see a lot of heads shaking there because text is so impactful. I just tend to, text things to my children, telling them what to do, and that always goes flawlessly. There's no misinterpretation there. There's no good music these days. So let's go forward. So I think everybody's spot on here. You guys are quiet, though. So yeah, working software is a primary measure of progress. That's key. It really is. And obviously face-to-face communication. All right, last round, last chance to make up those points and win that developer license. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective. Adjust and adapt. See a lot of head shaking there. Yep. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Lots of head shaking. Quick survey before we go further. In your real world, how often does that happen? Whether you're doing Agile, Waterfall, or anything else. Yeah, if you're doing Agile right, but in the real world, Agile or Waterfall, how often does that really happen the way it should? I mean, in a really good organization, if you can do it, that's great. But how many folks think that that's just not occurring where I live right now? It's a right. Right. And so I assume a lot of you are, in the project management type and looking down that field. That's key, is to reaching out to those business folks, even though they don't show up to the scrums and they're not engaged. You got to kind of drag them by the ear, because this is a new world for them too. They're not used to having a say directly in what occurs in the system. They're used to saying, oh, I want it to do this, and then waiting for a year, and it comes back, and that's not what I want. I want it to do C, not B. So as Agile implementers, it's your goal, it's your task. You need to get those folks engaged proactively, and force it on them, drag them in there, give them treats, give away free things, get them in there. Where are we at here? Oops, buttons. Oh, I just gave away all the answers. Trying trying to find a laser. There we go. Delivery of well-defined requirements is essential to success. You guys just saw that. It's not. That's a throw out there. Agile process promotes sustainable development. This is true. The theory is that you can maintain a constant pace indefinitely. I'm not sure I buy that because people are people and they want to move on to new things. And the last one is Han shot first. So if anybody knows that reference, it's a given. So everyone wins a free developer license. For those of you that didn't get the joke, our developer license is free for anyone to download. Same free training too. I'll give you all free training. So you just go out to MarkLogic University and you can get whatever training you need out there, including MarkLogic 9. So these are the 12 tenets. This is from the Agile Alliance. We hit on most of them. This one, number one, obviously, is the one I care about, is satisfying the customer, getting them engaged early. That makes everything else successful. That makes it roll going forward and gets their buy-in so they show up to Scrum meetings and gives you a proper feedback. And it's a balancing act, too, of identifying the right customers. Because if you get the wrong business user, the wrong mix of business users, you could have the same thing where you build the wrong solution pinpointed to one group of people when you have a whole nother subset of users that you've ignored. So you need to make sure you have that balance of who's engaged and make sure that there's weight and a breadth there. Does that make sense? Still early, huh? Okay. I'm going to talk about an example. I started this project when I was thin and had no gray hair. Very large government agency in the intelligence community. Had all military services involved in it, working towards a single goal. You're involved peripherally, right? So it was originally attempted in Waterfall. It involved taking information and policies and procedures from all the branches of the service, putting them together in a single view type database. It wasn't MarkLogic at the time. But the challenge was, in a waterfall methodology, we designed it up front, built it, and then took it to the users. And you took it to the Navy, and the Navy said, this isn't what I need. It needs to do this. So then we took it to the Army, and we backed it up with, well, we have specs, we have requirements. You guys signed off on all these requirements. Took it to the Army, and the Army says, well, if the Navy wants that, I want, flying dolphins if the Navy wants trucks. So has anyone worked with large military organizations or large government organizations like that? You know the competition, the competitiveness is incredible, right? They can't let the other branch get ahead of them. And we got stuck in this horrible cycle of going back and forth, refining requirements, changing the system. And it was a project that should have taken us 10 months to a year. Again, not on MarkLogic, this was a relational thing, but the story is so appropriate. Took us over 2 years, and the only way we became successful is, as a management team, we switched to Agile without telling them we were switching to Agile. We just practiced Agile, called meetings together. It included a lot of great airline miles and hotels points those couple years. I'm a Marriott Platinum level for life thanks to this customer. But it was literally go to the Navy, go to the Army, go to the Air Force, go to the Marines, and just keep that cycle going. And then whenever we could, bring them together. And instead of trying to eat the elephant in one big bite, we just took the Agile approach in small chunks and small chunks. And in the end, the system was great. Developed it, it worked really effectively, and the government in their wisdom squashed it because of political infighting. But this system itself got delivered because we switched to Agile and didn't depend on the waterfall methodology. Anyone else have that type of experience where they had a waterfall project that they've gotten into it and they realized that, well, this just isn't going to work? Yeah? Can you tell me about it?
Any outsourcing
Yeah, time shift is a big one. But no, you still, even Agile, you don't throw requirements away. You have requirements that you're building to. It's just you keep it in smaller chunks, right? And you have a timeline. I mean, you caught me. Even when I'm doing an Agile project from the ground up, I initiate it and I start my planning in Microsoft Project. You still get a big, long view of the project, where the value of Agile is, once you know what you're shooting towards, or what you think you're shooting towards, then you take in small bites and move one to the other to the other. So managing the offshore is a challenge no matter what, or outsourcing whomever. And you have to have team members that are willing to shift off schedule sometimes, but you give them that small bites and you work in those boundaries. And then when you get into, the harder part up front is getting the contractual stuff out. And that's just a painful fact of life, because Agile is different. The contracting people, the business folks, can't write that into contracts yet. And that's a challenge. It's a challenge for me on a daily basis. We try in our projects to call out Agile methodology and how the need for change is constant. And so you broaden the language a little in those contracts and just talk in generalities. But a lot of times the lawyers and the business folks won't let you get through with that. So then it's a matter of change management on paper. So you have to go back and document what your decisions were in Agile and get the change management in place for that. It's very painful if you have to do it, so it's easier to set those boundaries up front. Does that make sense? Answer your question? Okay. Anybody else? Any other horror stories using Waterfall? Building systems in flight. I did another large government program, theme here. I spent a lot of my time in the federal spaces, and now I'm working commercial. It's so much nicer to be results oriented. Large intelligence agency, multi-year project involving hundreds of vendors, trying to get them all on a sourcing system for data. And the same kind of thing. It was that never went to Agile, and it failed. But just the scope and the breadth was so big that there's no way to change. And it's just painful. Life is complex. So are projects. So you may have seen, if you've seen some of our presentations, you may have seen this number. 80% of data scientists' time is spent wrangling data. I had a cat herding picture in here. They made me take it out. That's a big number. You want your data scientists to focus on the data and what they can learn from it, not just managing the data till it gets to a point where they can use it. Does anybody have that kind of thing with their teams, where the data guys are spending a lot of time trying to figure out just to get the data to where they can actually act upon it? See some heads shaking. It's a big challenge until now. This is an incredible number to me. 6.4% of IT projects were considered successful. Now, success criteria, I mean, that's on time, on budget, on scope, delivered, everything. That I had to double check that number when I looked it up. That's scary, even for me. I will say I've got a higher success rate. I'm into double digits, but not 100% successful. Nobody can be 100% successful. Do you guys have a similar success rate? Are you experiencing the same kind of things? Is it that low, or challenges in your projects? Yes. 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 That was just overall projects from this survey, Computer World, from 2003 to 2012. So your business is changing, and your data and infrastructure is changing. Right? The only thing constant is change. It's what we live for. You know? How many folks are in a regulated industry, banking, insurance, something like that? And you know those regulations change all the time, right? The MIFID things, the healthcare. And when you have a structured system and a structured process, adapting to that change is incredibly slow and painful. See, I'm going on time here. You know, virtualization and cloud. Sorry, I'm enunciating. How many folks are on the cloud or thinking about the cloud? Yeah, lots and lots of hands. That's, as you heard Gary say, probably, that's really a lot of the future of the world. It's not the end state for everybody, but it's there. These other challenges, machine learning. Does anyone have thoughts over machine learning? There you go. I've got some customers that are doing that. We're helping them. It's a big challenge, and there's no easy answers. But if you, back to, I obviously have an agile bias, if you try to force those projects into a waterfall or any other super structured approach, it makes life more difficult for you. The beauty of agile is being adaptive and responsive. So again, it's a theme here. Traditional approach, waterfall down, you start with a snapshot, understand where you think you are, design your new data model, which takes a lot of time, right? Who's show of hands, who's done a data model redesign, a schema redesign? Just one, two, yeah. It's painful, especially in the relational world. You do your ETL, move your data over, create the indexes, build your apps, and then changes come. Oh, we got a new data feed. We now have to include blood pressure feed on a person's health record that we didn't have before, average blood pressure. Well, guess what? You're back at square one again. That's what we're hoping to help you avoid. That starting over back at the very beginning again. We do recycling as we go. Everything can change, right? That's the beauty of Agile. You can handle those changes. In a waterfall, a change in the middle of a process is incredibly disruptive, right? It throws your system off track. It throws your people off track. Agile embraces that change, encourages that change. Agile is disruptive and change is hard. It's disruptive to an organization that hasn't done Agile before, that's been a traditional waterfall organization. Is anyone here from Aetna? So Aetna, when we first started going to them, you heard them referenced in the keynote. I was the program manager for those two initial projects. When we got there, they were a purely waterfall shop. Nothing but waterfall. Didn't understand the concepts of Agile, didn't understand the concept of Scrum, and it was a difficult process trying to ease them into the world of Agile. They said, oh yeah, we want to do Agile, we're going to do Agile. What's a Scrum? And we brought them along. So at the end of the second project, a little bit after 2 years, and it wasn't just all us. I mean, internally they realized they needed to go to Agile. The waterfall for this first project was very cumbersome and painful, and when we started talking about rework in some of the code and the changes as we went through, people's heads would just explode. What do you mean rework? We had specs, we wrote code, we don't go back and rewrite code. It was a change inside the system. It was difficult for them to adapt to that concept. And that's important. If your organization is moving towards Agile, it's important you help folks get in that mindset that the old ways don't necessarily apply. Change is good. Rework is good. So at the end of the 2 years, and I apologize, I had a picture and I lost it. They went from, waterfall to an agile waterfall, and now they're pretty agile. They have created Scrum rooms, Scrum areas. They've got their teams laid out. It's much as what you'd expect in a real agile shop. Great success story. Is anyone in that transition in your organizations from moving from a purely waterfall to agile? No? It's a challenge if you need. So, the heart of the matter, why agile with MarkLogic? So it's not just agile. that we're advocating, it's with MarkLogic, because you can follow the data and respond to business users. This is key. So, and you've seen in some of the other presentations, we highly recommend at an initial project startup, you bring the data into MarkLogic and let it guide you. And there's several reasons for that. Your data in the database, you can make connections that you didn't know exist before you even get your project going. So the initial view, taking a look at that data and let it guide your project where you need to go. Clear illustration of this. There's a police department in the UK. We're doing a pilot with them, just a proof of concept, little 2-3 week thing. And we said, give us a sampling of your data. We'll put it in the database and show you what you got. Well, in that pilot, that wasn't meant to do anything. They put the data in the database, they did it up, looked at a couple relationships, and boom, they found a child predator in their data that they wouldn't have been able to make that connection before. And they didn't think to make the connections that got them to find this person and lock them up, get them off the streets. That's the power of following your data. This is, your world's all about data, and following that data to its end state is a great way to get results. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Can you guys see in your worlds how that would help?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Load data to MarkLogic.
Yes.
And MarkLogic will guide. I load data to MarkLogic, but later I do transformation, look at it. What MarkLogic can do for me?
So, no, that's a great question. So if you didn't hear, the question was, I said load data into MarkLogic and MarkLogic will guide you, and you do the transforms later. It's not that MarkLogic will guide you, it's the data will guide you. So once the data is in MarkLogic, you need to analyze it, you need to look at it, but you can connect relationships in the data then that when you had 5 different data sources, that connection was, you couldn't make that connection between A and B and C. Once it's in the database, you can do some data analysis and look at it. It's not magic, even though if you take out the ARK-LOG, you get magic. It's not magic. There is some work involved. But the beauty of it is it's much simpler, and all the data is there together. So you can have the search capabilities link those connections. Is everyone familiar with MarkLogic and the fact that we index every piece of data on the way into the database? So everything's in those indexes. And by using the power of those indexes in the search, you can make those linkages and do that examination of the data that'll guide you, where you want to go with your project and how you want to use those data sources. Does it make sense?
Yes, I see how we do it, but because I know that and later I look at data, I write my queries, I write transformations, and use it.
Okay.
It's not that I get tools, I don't know those tools from MarkLogic.
Okay. So I can get some folks with you. I'm a director of professional services. I have consulting people that do that all the time, and there's some, not freeware, but online users group kind of things too. But if anyone wants it, I have business cards up here. You're free to contact me, and my information in the slide deck too. But yeah, we'll get some folks showing you how to do that. Any other questions on that? I'm serious. If you guys don't speak up, we're going to end up talking about my finger in this home improvement project. Another beauty, you're not anchored to this predefined schema. If you need to change that setup, if you need to change, if new data sources come in or go away, become optional, not optional, if they change, you're not tied to it. You don't have to start back over. You adapt and embrace and move on. Disparate data types, same thing. You're not locked into the schema, you're not locked into, this has to be a date format in this field or I reject it. If you choose, you can bring any data in what you think is a date and then flag it, but you're still not, it's not a showstopper. You don't have to redesign everything. Or you may find, there's one case where what the customer had been calling I think it was a date field, they were using to store secondary information that wasn't a date. It was, it was mislabeled data. They still needed that data, but it was really, I can't recall exactly what it was. It was, I think it was an employee number that at the time, because they had a structured schema that they couldn't change, they had nowhere to put it when this new employee number came on board. They had to account for it. So they dropped it in a date field. Well, that makes all good sense if you're not going to leave that system. But as soon as they brought that data over to us, all these dates were just straight numbers. So rather than redesigning all our schemas, we just said, oh, okay, well, that field is, it's not a date anymore. It's an employee number, secondary employee number. Flexibility, agility, adaptability. And again, you get value immediately. So this Aetna HR system where they had hundreds of data sources, agility-wise, we just picked the top 10 first. Take it in small bites. Pick the ones you think are the biggest impact, bring them in first, and work from there, and then grow. And you can also get repeatable patterns. Once you get those first data sources done, you identify your repeatable patterns, and it just goes faster and faster and faster. So the process, ingest it as is. Don't worry about mapping it out. Don't worry about ETL. It's ELT, if you need the T. You extract it, you load it. And this can be almost any process you can think of, whether it's a flat file, whether it's a straight feed, whether it's a SQL query. Just get the data into the database. Access the data. Look at it. Let the data guide you where you need to go. And be flexible about it. And then harmonize and enrich the data. Does anyone know what that means, to harmonize and enrich the data in MarkLogic terms? It means taking these disparate data sources, getting them to a single view, harmonizing all the views of an employee, say, that come from 20 different systems, into a single view of that employee, a 360, in this case, if you're talking about employees, a 360 view of that employee. And then you enrich that even further so that you get more power out of it in the semantics leaking of an employee in this department has these type of skill sets. And that enrichment is where the power just takes off, that you can do so much more with the semantics and the enrichment. Mm-hmm.
That if you're sending in XML or anything along those lines that has tags, but I understand it also does completely unstructured data.
Yes.
How does that work? What do you have to do to get it in the database, and once it's in, how do you relate it to other things?
So there's several methods, but the key part is to tag it and index it on the way in. So it, especially the indexing, but you can apply tags later. But the trick is to tag it, index it on the way in, so then you can link it.
Say you had a Word document.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So every term, every piece of MarkLogic, every word in a document is indexed as it comes in. So not just the document as a whole. Automagically, the global index every. Now, if you're coming in with a blob or something like that that's unrecognizable, a PDF that can't be converted, there's some challenges there. You might want to convert that to a readable text form. And then we have some other tools that can go, you can tag those blobs if you have known factors to go with them. And if that's a challenge for you, get with me, because I've got some guys that do that on a regular basis. But it is it is possible to do, and it's highly what's the word I'm searching for? Highly effective. We have an insurance company that's all their claims are in PDFs. And we showed them how they could ingest those PDFs and then link them back to customer records and look for fraud. But their suppliers only give them the claims in PDF. So we're able to link them back in through the PDFs and to their customers and detect fraud where there's inappropriate billing. Any other questions on the harmonizing enrichment? Yes. So his question was, do we have the ability to annotize and write it back, you mean to the source system? Yes, we do. So we can do events that trigger an event if this field's updated, trigger back to the source system, or you can just provide an output to a source system. And yes, you can annotate a document and a record in any way you want. So the eventing, if you guys aren't familiar with our eventing, very powerful tool. It lives in the system, and if you set your parameters, it can trigger whatever you need. But a notice downstream that something occurred is perfectly within the realm. And then you operationalize that. Get it in production, get it working. And part of the Agile is to take that feedback and keep doing that. So you're not done once you hit production, frankly. You should be checking that, checking with your users, looking for ways to improve and upgrade, making sure that things are gone. How many folks have delivered a system into production, wiped their hands, and never saw it code-wise again? Anybody? No perfect systems. So agile development means agile data. Data that's able to move quickly and easy. Again, bring the data in, search and query in real time. As soon as that data is in there, it's searchable. It's in the index, you can query it. Harmonize and enrich the data. This is important too. Persist the data in a reliable and secure fashion. Both David and Gary spoke this morning about security and data persistence and provenance. Just because we're agile and we're fast doesn't mean that we're not secure. It's a key part of it. And you have to be able to go back and provide that provenance, that data lineage in your documents. You can keep that change history. What's Agile give you? The MarkLogic? Immediate value, faster times to results. And let's face it, it's a political world. You guys running projects have internal users, internal stakeholders, financial people who are putting pressure on you to get things done. The quicker you can show results and progress, the less headaches you'll get from those folks. They won't call you at 4 in the afternoon on a Friday, say, I need to see this report, that's your TPS report that says how far along you are on your percentage of development complete, because they'll have seen results, and you'll be able to point to results. And if you take this to the end state and get those results into production early on a small set, you'll achieve that goal much earlier. You can say, I got stuff in production, we're just adding to it now. It's a big message when faced up against this. And those pressures are real. How many folks have lived through that of a budget person or a non-technical business user putting pressure on you to wanting to know where your project is and why it's not done to the plan that was written 2.5 years ago? I see some heads nodding. Change is constant, and those kind of things are painful. So quicken, I won't say easy, but quicker times to the results. So some of the best practices, right? This is where we're getting into some more of the meat. Scrum, code, and instance management. From a MarkLogic perspective, this is a recommended best practice. Use some form of code management tool. Is there anyone here in the organization that doesn't have a code management tool that they use? Besides, like Word doc or something? So there's a plethora of them out there, but please use them, leverage them. Make them work for you. Plan your instances. Dev, test, prod is a minimum. With MarkLogic, the developers can have their own local instance on a MarkLogic, and a lot of times on their laptops, and you can merge them together into a dev or a test prod. They don't all have to be operating on the same instance to merge things together, but that calls into the management tool to make sure those merges get used together. But this is a strong one. Doesn't always happen for financial reasons, but to get a real view of what your production performance is going to be, you should have an exact copy. Kept in sync. I see heads shaking. Never happens, does it? So massive. Yes. So you're never going to get there. Yeah. So then you have to, how do you do it today? How do you manage that?
We take a slice
And then did you constantly review that data? So I'm sorry, he said they have over 200 servers, and that scale just doesn't work for them. So they take a slice of what they think is a representative set of data, and then test at that same scale, that same ratio and proportion. Do you go back and then check those ratios of the data and the proportions on a semi-regular basis?
That's one of the things we're trying to, actually we're going to be about MarkLogic professional development coming to us, because we're not doing the scale correct. We do it as best as we can, but sometimes
Yeah.
we're all, we thought we had it at 18 servers this month. Oh crap, we got it wrong. We got to put that budget up for another 4 months. And, it's tough.
Yeah. And that's a problem when you get up to that large. But the key is to do that as updates, keep those ratios in balance, because
The test data isn't as accurate as we thought it was. It's a tiny little sheet, like a couple of K at that scale throws everything.
exactly. Yeah.
It's the back for stock size.
Yep. And then go back and recheck, because customer users, the usage pattern changes over time as well. So it's important to keep that cycle ongoing. If you notice the theme on Agile, it's everything's cyclic. So, but you have some help coming? Okay, great. So another best practice, rinse, lather, repeat. Develop repeatable, measurable, and testable processes. Rework is not a dirty word. Okay? On an instance level, it's easy to back up and wipe clean if you really get to that point. Let's try something new. Go do it. And you say, just throw it away. It's not horrible. Yes, sir.
That rework piece for us anyways, that was the hardest part for business to get together. That, you're delivering something that you're not necessarily going to get right the first time. And get a ticket reopened or things like that. That seemed to be a really horrible thing for a while. But now they seem to be coming around that plans change. That's the whole idea behind what we're doing, is that things evolve. So.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Getting folks to that concept that rework's okay. It's
They're much more agreeable to it now. Like, if there's a feature that we can't fit in, it gets pushed to the next
push the
one.
lid.
It's not a big deal.
And they're engaged in that process, helping to determine those priorities.
Help making that decision of what we're going to do.
And that's a key tenet of Agile, and that's a key tenet of what we like to do, is get those folks involved, get their feedback. And so they feel ownership, right? It's not just like, oh, the IT guys threw this over the fence to me. I help determine what goes into this. That's key. Built-in unit tests. Strong recommendation. With folks that we've encountered that are new to MarkLogic, that went out and tried to do it without us, this isn't a normal concept in a waterfall, hard-coded world where you build the code to a spec, and the test says it passed the spec, and then you're done with it. You embed these unit tests in with the code so that your regression tests, when things change, can be automated, and you don't have to go back and run your UAT again on code that you wrote a year ago because you had made changes elsewhere. So very, very strong recommendation as a best practice here to assist you in your Agile methodology. Have those tests in there, have them repeatable, testable, and redo them. Standards. Establish code standards, expectations, enforce those standards. There's many ways to do many things, but as an organization and an Agile process, you should have a standard way of writing code, of delivering certain processes of code, and you need to enforce those standards. That way, a year from now, you don't find somebody wrote a rogue piece of code that didn't adhere to your standards and it went off track. That make sense? Anyone have challenges with that? That one developer has one technique, another has a different one, and it catches you later? I see some smiles and head nods. Review and adapt. Again, the same with rework. Keep what works, change what doesn't. It's hard for some organizations, some people to grasp that concept, but it's essential. If it's not working, change it. I think you've probably all heard that definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If it's not working, change it. Okay. Centers of excellence. So this is my personal windmill. I I believe strongly in centers of excellence for organizations beyond one project. It gives you improved quality, increased efficiency, and decrease costs and reduce risk. So what this means is you create within your organization a center of MarkLogic experts, and we have the tools that allow you then to provide external interfaces to developers that don't have to know MarkLogic. So this team sets that standard for all your MarkLogic projects instead of one project over here, one project over here, and they're kind of similar. They're both using MarkLogic, but some of the techniques and things are different. A center of excellence is key to an organization being successful long-term on a wide scale. Consolidate your SMEs, so you don't have all these verticals that each have their own MarkLogic specialist. It saves you efficiencies and it gets to that standard. And baseline configuration and practices, very key. Okay, we're sharing these slides. Here's some resources and links for you. This Plan for Success white paper is fantastic. This load data as is in a pattern is a really good one to talk about data loading and how you manage it. Data modeling, rethink data modeling. So almost out of time and I'm between you and lunch, but I'll